Hey everyone, Teacher Chang here, and today we're going to go ahead and use our quadratic formula to help us solve quadratic equations. Now, in order to do that, we got to remember that our equation must be in standard form. Now, that standard form looks like this. It's that ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. So we want to make sure that it's in that format, and that way we can tell what is our a, our b, and our c value. So just make sure that your equation is set equal to 0. Once it's set equal to 0, all you got to do is plug and play. You substitute everything into this formula. X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And we got to keep in mind that we have this plus or minus sign here. And that plus or minus sign basically means that we have a possibility of getting two solutions. Now, most of the time we will have two solutions. There are some occasions where we'll only have one, and there may even be some occasions where we'll have no solutions. And when we have something that is no solution, well, chances are we're going to be working with imaginary numbers, which will be another video. So we'll go ahead and take a look at our real solutions, and we're going to go ahead and start off with a very simple example here. So this example right over here, we have it in standard form already. It's already set equal to 0, and I can tell what are my a, b, and c values are. So right over here in front of our x squared, there is a 1. We just don't always write that 1. So we have a is going to be our 1. Our b is going to be that negative 2. Remember that minus sign just tells us it's a negative value. And c is going to be negative 35. So we have our A, we have our B, and we have our C. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this equation here, or this formula here, and instead of writing in my A's and my B's and my C's, I'm just going to write in everything that I need. That's not going to change. So I have my negative B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4 times A times C all over 2A. So this is basically the skeleton of our formula, and all we got to do is substitute the information that we have. So again, negative b, well, that means negative 2. I'm just substituting here. I'm not going to do anything yet. I'm just going to place our numbers in here. And then we have our b squared, so that means negative 2 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is negative 35. And I want you to take note that I'm putting all of my numbers in parentheses. So anytime you substitute, you got to put it in parentheses here. Now we're just going to go ahead and simplify. So I'm going to simplify one section at a time. So if I go ahead and take a look at this first one, I got my negative 2. Well, negative times the negative is a positive, so that's positive 2. And then I have my plus or minus, and then the square root. And now I'm going to go ahead and do this negative 2 squared. Well, negative 2 squared means negative 2 times negative 2. And a negative times a negative is a positive, so that's going to give me positive 4. And now I'm going to go ahead and multiply this negative 4 times 1 times negative 35. And if I multiply those together, that's going to give me a positive 140. So I'm going to write down plus 140 to show it's positive. And then last but not least, we're going to go ahead and do this bottom portion. And that bottom portion is just 2 times 1. And well, 2 times 1 is just 2. Now all of this is still equal to x. Okay, so we simplified it a little bit. And now we're just going to simplify it a little bit more. We're going to go ahead and take that 4 and that 140 inside this radical. We're just going to add those together. So if I add those together, everything else stays the same. I got 2 plus or minus the square root of, and 4 plus 140 is 144, and all over 2. Okay, it's getting a little bit better. Now I'm going to go ahead and take that square root of 144, and if I could square root that and get a nice whole number, I'm going to go ahead and write that out. So now I'm going to go ahead and write all this out. It says x is equal to 2 plus or minus, and the square root of 144 is 12. So that's going to be plus or minus 12 all over 2. Okay. All right. Well, remember that plus or minus sign says that we have two possible solutions. So I'm going to go ahead and break this up into two possible scenarios. The first scenario is a plus sign. So x is equal to 2 plus 12 over 2. And our second possibility is x is equal to 2 minus 12 over 2. So that plus and minus, I kind of broke it up into two small problems here. So I'm going to go ahead and solve each one of these. And the first one, I'm just going to go ahead and add the 2 and the 12. So that's now going to be 14 over 2. And well, 14 over 2 is just 7. In the second one, I have 2 minus 12. And 2 minus 12 is negative 10. And that's still over 2. And negative 10 over 2 is negative 5. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and write out my final solution set. So I'm going to put it inside a set. We typically write it in numerical order. So negative 5 is before 7. So negative 5 and 7. Those are my two possibilities, or my two solutions. Okay, so all we did here is we identified what is A, B, and C. We substituted it into the formula, and we just kind of solved it little by little. So let's go ahead and try another one. Also already in standard form, but this one is slightly different, and you're going to see why when we start solving this. So I chose this problem for a particular reason. So I'm going to start off by identifying what is A, B, and C. So A is 3, B is negative 8, and C is negative 2. And once again, I'm just going to substitute everything into my formula. So negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2 times a. So I'm just going to fill in the blanks here. So once again, negative b, well, b is negative 8, so negative 8, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so negative 8 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 3, times c, which is negative 2, all over 2 times a, which is 3. So again, I just substitute everything in there. So now I'm just going to go ahead and solve it little by little. I'll start off with that negative 8. And again, a negative and a negative is a positive, so that's going to give me positive 8. And then I have my plus or minus, a square root, and now I'm going to go ahead and do that negative 8 squared. Well, negative 8 squared means negative 8 times negative 8, and a negative times a negative is a positive, so that's going to give me positive 64. And then we're going to go ahead and multiply negative 4 times 3 times negative 2, and well, negative 4 times 3 is negative 12. Negative 12 times negative 2 is going to give me positive 24, so I'm going to write down plus 24 to show it's a positive 24. And then all of that is over 2 times a. Well, 2 times 3 is going to give me 6. So 2 times 3 is 6. All of this is still equal to x. So I kind of simplified that up a little bit. And again, we're going to go ahead and add the two values inside that radical, inside that square root. So now I have x is equal to 8 plus or minus the square root. Well, 64 plus 24 is 88, all over 6. Now, if we pull out our calculator and we try to go ahead and do the square root of 88, this is what it's going to look like. I'm going to pull out my calculator here, and I'm going to go ahead and do the square root of 88, and that's not a nice whole number. In fact, let me go ahead and put that back into a decimal form. So I'm going to go ahead and do math and change it back to a decimal. So that's going to give us 9.38 in terms of a decimal. And we don't want that. We want to try to get an exact value here. So to get that exact value, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take that root 88. Okay, we can read it as root 88. And we're going to go ahead and simplify that. I'm going to do a little bit of scrap work right over here. So I want to simplify the square root of 88. Now, if you don't remember how to do that, I'm going to show you really quickly. We're going to go ahead and use our factor tree, and we're going to break it down as far as we can in terms of prime numbers. So I'm going to ask myself, what times what is 88? Well, it's an even number, so I could divide it by 2, which means 2 times 44. Well, 2 is a prime number. I could continue to split up 44. Well, that's easy. 4 times 11. Well, 11 is a prime number, but not 4. So I'm going to split up 4, and that's going to give me 2 and 2. So the prime factorization for 88 is 2 times 2 times 2 times 11. So I take all my prime numbers. And if you actually multiply all those out, well, you're going to get that 88. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to look for pairs. So I see a pair of 2s, and that's going to come outside my square root or outside my radical. And anything that doesn't have a pair, I'm going to put it right back inside the radical. So that what doesn't have a pair is that 2 and that 11. Well, 2 times 11 is 22. So that means the square root of 88 in simplest form is 2 root 22. So these two are the same. So if I go ahead and simplify this out a bit, I can now write out x is equal to 8 plus or minus, and again, the square root of 88 is now 2 root 22. That's the simplest form in terms of that radical. And all of this is still over 6. Now, a lot of us might think we're done here, but we're not quite done, because what we want to do is we want to continue to simplify. And what I notice is that this 8, this 2, and this 6, all of our whole numbers here, if I could divide them by the same number, I'm going to do so. I'm going to simplify our fractions. Well, 8, 2, and 6, they all can be divided by 2. So that 8 becomes a 4, that 2 becomes 1, and that 6 becomes 3. So I divided all of these by 2, and now our solution is going to look like this. It's going to say x is equal to 4 plus or minus 1 root 22 is the same thing as just root 22 all over 3. Now this right here is the exact value. We know that this is the exact answer. Now, if I wanted a rounded value, yeah, I could go ahead and put everything into my calculator, and I could go ahead and put it in directly into my calculator based off of what I have here. So if I wanted the rounded answer, well, this is how I would type it in. I'm going to go ahead and get my fraction bar, so I could go ahead and hit alpha y equals to get my fraction, and I'll choose the first one. And now I got a numerator and a denominator. Now remember, we have two possible solutions because of that plus or minus. So I'm going to do one at a time. I'm going to start off with that plus. I'm going to do 4 plus the square root of 22, and then I'm going to divide that by 3. So I'm just copying what I have here, and I hit enter, and my first possibility is x is equal to about 2.89. Okay, now well, maybe I should round that to 2.9. Okay, so let's go ahead and round that to 2.9. Okay, so the first one is about 2.9. All right, now, if I want to go ahead and get the other one, a quick way to do that is if you hit second enter. That's going to bring back my last entry, and all I got to do is use my arrows and go over to that plus sign and change it to a minus sign. I hit enter, and now I got the other half. So x is now equal to negative 0.23. So these are my rounded solutions, but we want to go ahead and try to get that exact solution if possible. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at these other ones and see what happens here. Now, this second one, or this next one here, is a little bit different because now it's not in standard form. So we want to go ahead and move that 4 over to the left so that the equation's set equal to 0. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract 4 on both sides. The 4's on the right will cancel each other out, leaving us with our 0 is now equal to 15x squared minus 8x minus 4. And now that we have it in standard form, we know what our a value is, which is 15, our b value, negative 8, and c, negative 4. So once again, same thing like before, all we're going to do is substitute everything into our equation or into our formula. So x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. So now I'm going to plug everything in. So negative b, so negative 8. B is negative 8. Plus or minus the square root of b squared, so negative 8 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 15, times c, which is negative 4, all over 2 times a, so 2 times 15. Okay, so now we're just going to go ahead and simplify this. And I'm not going to change colors here. I'm just going to go ahead and simplify it. So negative 8 means positive 8. And then we have our plus or minus the square root. And negative 8 squared is 64. Negative 4 times 15 times negative 4 is going to give me positive 240. All over 2 times 15, which is 30. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and combine my my 64 and my 240. So if I combine that, that's now going to give me x is equal to 8 plus or minus the square root of 304 all over 30. Now 304 is not going to give me a nice number, so I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. I'm going to do my prime factorization, do a little bit of scrap work. And I know it's an even number, so I can divide it by 2. So that's going to be 2 and 152. 2 is prime. 152 is also even, so I can divide it by 2. So that's 2 times 76. 2 is a prime again. Still even, so divided by 2, so 2 and 38. Still even. That's going to give me 2 and 19. And, well, 19 is a prime number. Okay, so we could go ahead and write out the prime factorization. 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. We got 4 2's, and we have a 19. And like before, we said that we're going to look for pairs. Well, I have a pair of 2's, and I have another pair of 2's. So when we have more than one pair, we're going to multiply those together. So 2 times 2 is going to give me 4. So I have 2 sets of 2. So 2 times 2 is 4. And whatever's left over, which is that 19, I'm going to put it right back inside that radical. So 4 root 19 is the same thing as root 304. So these two are the same. Okay. So now we could go ahead and write this out as x. And I'm going to write this up here. So we got x is now equal to 8 plus or minus 4 root 19 all over 30. So we're almost there. All we got to do is simplify, because we know that we could divide the 8, the 4, and the 30 by 2. So this becomes 4. This becomes 2. This becomes 15. So I could divide all of them by 2. So now our final solution, x is equal to 4 plus or minus 2 root 19 all over 15. So this is my final solution. I'm going to leave it like this. And if you want to, you could go ahead and write it in terms of decimal form. All you got to do is substitute it into your calculator or type it into your calculator. And if you did that, your two solutions would have been negative 0.315 and 0.848 or something like that. Okay, let's go ahead and try another one here. And this will be our last one here. So we got 4x squared minus 20x is equal to negative 25. And if you want to pause and try it out on your own first, by all means, go ahead and do so. All right, so again, not in standard form. So that's the first thing that we want to do, is we want to get it in standard form. So that means I'm going to add 25 on both sides. We want it equal to 0. So that means the 25's on the right will cancel each other out, leaving us with 4x squared minus 20x plus 25 is now equal to 0. All right, now we know what is a, b, and c. So a is equal to 4, b is negative 20, c is 25. And again, I'm going to write out my formula here. So x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. So now I'm just going to substitute the values in. So negative b, so negative 20, and then b squared, so plus or minus the square root of b squared, so negative 20 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 4, times c, which is 25, all over 2 times a, which is 4. So again, I just substitute. Now all we got to do is simplify each part. So now I'm going to go ahead and simplify the first part. X is now equal to a negative 20 means positive 20. Negative 20 squared is going to give me 400. So negative 20 times negative 20 is positive 400. And negative 4 times 25 happens to be negative 400. And all of this is over 2 times 4, which is 8. Now this is nice. And the reason why this is nice is because, well, if we combine this 400 minus 400, that's just 0. And the square root of 0 is just 0. So now I got 20 plus or minus 0 is equal to 8. Well, 20 plus 0 is just 20, and 20 minus 0 is also 20. So this is one of those solutions where we only have one possible solution. We only have one answer here. So we got 20 over 8. Because no matter if I add 0 or subtract 0, it's still going to give me 20 over 8. Well, 20 over 8, we could simplify that. And if we simplify that, that's going to end up being 5 over 2. We just divide both of these by 4. We get 5 over 2. So this is a scenario where we only have one solution. All right, I hope this helped out, and I hope you learned something from it and learned how to use that quadratic formula. And if you like it, give me a thumbs up, give me a like, and subscribe, make a comment, and I'll catch you on the next one.